The snow had teeth that winter of 1893, sharp enough to bite through wool and bone, and it came down thick over the town of Briars, hollow as if the sky itself was trying to bury its sins. The girl staggered through it alone, her breath breaking into weak white clouds, her small hands trembling around the wooden bucket that was nearly as heavy as she was. Her name was Eliza May, and she was 8 years old, sick with a fever that had burned her thin body for days, yet sent out anyway because sickness didn't excuse hunger and poverty didn't pause for mercy. Her dress was patched and stiff with old dirt, soaked at the hem where it dragged through the snow, and her shoes were split at the toes, letting icy water kiss skin already blue with cold. Each step was slower than the last, but she forced herself forward because her mother was lying back at the shack, coughing blood into rags, whispering for water with lips too dry to cry anymore. Eliza reached the well at the center of town, the same well everyone used, the same well built with town money. But when she leaned against its stone wall, the world tilted hard. The bucket slipped from her fingers, hit the ground with a hollow knock, and she followed it down, knees first, then her small body crumpling sideways into the snow. Her cry was thin, more like a wounded animal than a child, and it echoed down the street where shops stood warm and lit, their windows glowing like promises no one intended to keep. People saw her. They always did. A baker paused behind his window, hands dusted with flour, watching her try and fail to stand. A woman pulling her coat tight crossed the street to avoid her. Two men standing under the awning of the saloon glanced over, then looked away, muttering about drunks and beggars even though the girl was neither. In Briars Hollow, compassion had rules and poor children didn't qualify. Eliza's vision blurred, snowflakes melting on her eyelashes, her chest burning with every breath. She reached out weakly, fingers scraping stone, leaving faint red streaks where the cold had cracked her skin. "Please," she whispered, though no one leaned close enough to hear it clearly. The town looked away, and that was the moment death would have taken her. Quietly, efficiently, without a fuss. Then boots hit the snow hard. They came fast, heavy, desperate, the sound cutting through the soft hush of falling white. A man burst into the street from the far end, long coat flying open, hat pulled low against the storm, his breath ragged as he ran like the devil himself was at his heels. His name was Caleb Holt, and he had just ridden into town not 10 minutes earlier, leading a tired brown horse by the reins, planning only to warm himself, water his mount, and move on before dark. He had seen the girl fall from the corner of his eye and at first thought she'd slipped until she didn't get back up. Something in that stillness had twisted his gut, the same way it had years ago when he'd watched his own little sister collapse in the snow outside their homestead, a memory that still woke him some nights with a shout trapped in his throat. Caleb didn't think. He didn't ask, he ran. Snow soaked his boots as he dropped to his knees beside Eliza, his gloves off in seconds, rough hands gentle as they touched her face. She was burning and freezing at the same time. Skin too hot, lips pale, breath shallow. Hey, I've got you," he said, voice low but fierce, like if he spoke loud enough he could scare death away. Her eyes fluttered open just a crack, unfocused, and she tried to pull away, mumbling something about the bucket, about her mama. Caleb swallowed hard, scooped her up against his chest, and stood snow creaking under his weight. "You shouldn't be out here," he muttered, not to her, but to the town, to the doors that stayed shut, to the faces pretending not to see. Someone finally spoke. "You best not bring that sickness inside," a man called from the saloon doorway, his voice thick with whiskey and cowardice. Caleb turned slowly, eyes hard beneath the brim of his hat. "Then don't," he said, sharp as a gunshot, and walked past them all, carrying the girl as if she were made of glass. He didn't know her. He didn't know her, but he wasn't about to lose another child to a cold street and colder hearts. He headed for the only place he trusted, the small boarding house, at the edge of town, run by an old widow who still believed kindness mattered. Snow plastered his coat, his arms ached, but he didn't slow until he kicked the door open and shouted for help. Inside, warmth hit like a wave. The widow gasped when she saw the child, rushed forward with blankets, questions pouring out. But Caleb barely heard them. He laid Eliza down, watched her chest rise and fall, too shallow, too fast. "She needs a doctor," he said. The widow hesitated. "The doctor charges," she whispered. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then I'll pay," he answered without checking his pockets, without knowing if he even had enough. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and indifferent. covering footprints hiding guilt. Inside that small room, a line had been crossed. Not by the town, but by one man who refused to look away. And somewhere between the crackle of the fire and the girl's faint breathing, Briar's Hollow was about to learn that ignoring suffering doesn't erase. It only waits for someone brave enough to confront. The night pressed in hard against the boarding house windows, snow piling like the weight of everything Briar's Hollow refused to carry. While inside the small room, the battle for Eliza, May's life began in silence and sweat. The old widow, Mrs. Harper, worked with hands that had buried children of her own, boiling water, tearing clean strips from old sheets, murmuring prayers that trembled more than her fingers. Caleb Holt stood useless at the foot of the bed at first, hat in his hands, coat dripping onto the floor, watching the little girl twist and shiver as fever dragged her back and forth between waking and darkness. When the doctor finally arrived, late, irritated, smelling of medicine and arrogance, he barely hid his displeasure at being called out for a charity case. He checked Eliza's pulse, lifted her eyelids, frowned. "Pneumonia," he said flatly. "And fever's too high. She won't last the night without proper care." Mrs. Harper's shoulders slumped. "What can we do?" she asked. The doctor glanced at Caleb. "What you can afford," he replied. Caleb stepped forward, reached into his pocket, and laid everything he had on the table. Coins worn smooth from years of hard travel. A folded bill he'd been saving for a new saddle. "Then do everything," Caleb said, his voice steady but his eyes burning. The doctor hesitated only a second before nodding, because even men with thin souls recognize determination when they see it. Hours crawled by. The fire popped and hissed. Outside, the wind screamed like it wanted in. Eliza's breathing worsened, shallow and rattling, each breath a question mark hanging in the air. Caleb took over when Mrs. Harper's strength failed, holding a cool cloth to the girl's forehead, whispering words she might not hear but he needed to say. He told her about horses and open plains, about sunsets so wide they made pain feel small, about a world kinder than the one she'd known. And in the spaces between words, memories came for him, his sister Anna, her small body wrapped in blankets that couldn't save her, the way his father had stared at the floor because men like them didn't cry where others could see. Caleb's jaw clenched as guilt rose like bile. He hadn't been fast enough then. He wouldn't fail again. Just before dawn, when hope felt like a foolish luxury, Eliza's breathing slowed. Too slow. Mrs. Harper crossed herself. The doctor looked grim. Caleb felt something break open in his chest. "No," he whispered, gripping the bed frame, as if refusing the truth could change it. Then, faint, fragile, Eliza coughed. A weak sound but alive. Color crept back into her cheeks like sunrise touching snow. The doctor straightened, surprised despite himself. "She's fighting," he admitted. "She might make it." Caleb exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for years. Word spread through Briar's Hollow by morning. Not carried proudly, but whispered uneasy. The girl from the well hadn't died. A stranger had saved her. People who'd looked away now pretended they'd been busy, that they hadn't seen her fall, that they would have helped if only they'd known. Guilt makes cowards loud. Caleb didn't care. When Eliza finally woke, eyes clearer, voice hoarse, the first thing she asked was, "Mama?" Caleb smiled softly. "We'll get you to her," he promised.